All right, Shabbos say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Share to thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Steve and Teri Czinn, for dedicating all the shiurim and drushos this month in memory of Steve's father, Bunim Tzvi ben Chaim, Leah Sol as a zechus refuah sheleimah for her daughter Ilana Bas Esther, and for all of those wounded in Eretz Yisroel. Yonason Rachel Wolff for a complete and lasting refuah for Refuel Yitzchak Baruch ben Esther, Cherry and Sora Wolasky in the zechus refuah sheleimah for their grandson Zecharya Dov ben Perel Shira, Azriel and Iris Miller in the zechus of the holy soldiers of the IDF, and on the merit of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisroel. Our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Mark and Elsa Lussman, in memory of Elsa's father, Morris Cantor, Moshe Leib ben Chaim, Zichron Livracha, on the occasion of his 21st Yahrzeit, and Alan and Andy Stowis, in memory of Andy's father, Chaim Tzvi ben Avram, and in honor of the courageous IDF soldiers who are fighting on behalf of all of Klal Yisrael. And of course, again, we have all of maseches Bava Kamma dedicated to Eliyah Nishmas Master Sergeant Eliyahu Michael Harush. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, his neshama staff and aliya, and his family in neshama. But with that, let us begin. We have a very exciting daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Daf Vav 6. And we are picking up Am Yisroel on Haman days 5b. We left off Ela lemay hilchasa kasvinu rachmana lehilchosein. So this is now 2, 4, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom. So remember again, where we ended off yesterday's daf, is we highlighted the idea that technically speaking, one did not need to articulate all 4 of the primary categories of damages. Right? In other words, he didn't have to write shar, bar, ma, vehever. Technically speaking, you probably could have written 2 of them and learned out the other 2. We could have learned out the unwritten 2 from the written 2. Obviously, if the Torah goes out of its way to write all 4, and by definition, the Mishnah goes out of its way to codify all 4, that tells us that what? That tells us that halacha l'maisa, there's something unique that is being conveyed. So this is very interesting. So the Gemara therefore says, l'may hilchasa, so why did the Torah go out of its way to list all 4 of the primary categories? So watch this. I was saying, of course, the answer is, even before we get to it, the answer is because each of them have something unique. Each is unique. So what's unique? Here we go. Karen, lechalik ben tama lemuades. So Karen comes to teach us the distinction, or the unique aspect of Karen, is that there's a chilek between tam and muad. So remember again, by every other form of damages, there's maximum liability for a first-time offender. Karen, or shar, is the only time right where there's a distinction between a first-time offender and a second-time offender. Or I should say, really, it's a first-time offender and a third-time or fourth-time offender. Good. Shein v'regel, lepocham rishus. Shein and regel is written, why? In order to exempt shein and regel liability in the public domain. Rashi says over here, it's interesting. If you look at the first Rashi on the first white line, Rashi says lepocham rishus harabim tichsiv bahu ubir b'stei achar. We'll talk about this more, but the way the Torah phrases the damage, remember again, what shein and regel? Shein, damage done through hana, through consumption or through hana. Regel, damage done through activities of daily living. The way the Torah phrases that is ubir b'stei acher. My animal goes and damages in another field, which indicates to us that, the Gemara learns out, that shein and regel only creates liability when done in private domain. But if shein and regel damage is done in rishus harabim, there is no liability for that. Okay, bar, liftar bar sakelim. We'll say very interesting. Bar, the damage of bar of pit, one is only liable ultimately again if a person or an animal is damaged. But if utensils are damaged in the pit, ultimately no liability. No liability. Well, the Rabbi Yehuda, the mechayiv al niskei kelim babar, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that you are chayiv for damage liability for utensils in a pit, what does it come to exclude? Liftar ba'as ha'adam. It comes to exclude people. In other words, that should only be chayiv for kelim or for animals which fall into a pit, but not for a person. I'll say, by the way, what would be the logic? What would be the logic that there'd be an exam, right? I dig a pit. I suppose say again, and we'll see all of this. Here's what we know is you're not chayiv for all types of damage in a pit. So according to the first opinion, so in a pit, you're chayiv ultimately again for man and for animal, right? But exempt for utensils. According to second opinion, you're chayiv for utensils You're chayiv for utensils and animals, but pater for man. Why would there be an exemption? I dig a pit, someone falls into my pit. Why would there be exemption for that? Right. So interestingly enough, we'll see. Actually, I mentioned this I think a couple of days ago in a different context, quoting from the Gemara maseches makis di ibayle leiyune. People should be careful. People should be careful, right? Watch where you're going. So a pit liability. So in other words, it could very well be that a person could avoid bar damage. If you're not avoiding bar damage, especially also remember again, going back to what we said before, where is bar? Where is bar located? Rishus Harabim. Right? That remember again, bar is public domain. So especially in the public domain, where a person has to be conscious and a person has to be aware and a person has to be cognizant. So again, it's interesting. There's a school of thought that says one would not be liable for damages done within a bar. Very interesting. Okay, we'll come back to it. In general, again, we'll say that concept of the lashon of the Gemara in Maseches Makis is the iboy le'iyune. Be careful. Be careful. Sometimes things go wrong in life, and we say, "Oh, it's an accident." Okay, could be an accident, but just because something was an accident doesn't mean that there's not liability. Right? After all, again, a person is obligated to live life in general with a heightened sense of vigilance. So that therefore to be able to avoid many of the mistakes in life, whether they're interpersonal mistakes or again monetary mistakes, to live life with eyes open, a heightened sense of vigilance. Adam, what does Adam come to? So the chayvo ba'arba dvarim, or include. So Adam, I will say, is unique. Why is Adam unique? Because we'll say when a person damages, specifically another person, not only is there compensatory damages, but what else is there? There are these other buckets. Rashi says over here, 3 lines there from the bottom, l'chayvo ba'arba dvarim, sar, right, I have to pay for pain and suffering, ripui, doctor's bills, sheves, lost wages, and boshes, humiliation. Now, of course, there's another, which is actual nezek, damages. So in addition to damages, which everyone has to pay damages, again, Adam is unique because Adam has these 4 other buckets of payments. Eish, liftar basa tamun. This is interesting also, we'll talk about this as well. Eish is written, why? To exempt tamun. Also, we're going to see that when fire destroys, there is only liability when my fire destroys something that belongs to someone else that was visible. But if someone has my fire, let's say, goes out of my property, destroys something on Ruvain's property, but the item that is destroyed on Ruvain's property was hidden, there's no liability for that for Aish. Again, we'll learn all of that. We'll learn all of that as well as we go back to. So we'll say, so the point over here is what? The point over here is, as much as technically speaking, one could have learned liability for certain categories of damages from other categories of damages, and therefore maybe one could have made the argument that you don't have to write all 4 categories. The Torah goes out of its way to list all 4. Why? Because they're unique. Each one has its own unique quality, which could not have been learned out from another. In other words, I could have learned out liability one from the other, but each one has its own unique aspect, and that uniqueness could not have been learned out from the other. Therefore, all must be explicitly stated. Incredible. Rabbi Huda the Mechayiv on this ketam. I'm sorry, I didn't finish. Rabbi Huda the Mechayiv on this ketam be'esh last year. My Rabbi Huda holds that even if my fire destroys something which is hidden. So what does Eish come to include? La'asuye type above, la'asuye lichka niro v'sichsecha avan. To teach me a case of also have liability, where if a fire leaves my field and my fire goes ahead and literally lichka niro means that it like licks the land of my fellow. In other words, I will say there's liability for singeing the earth that belongs to someone else, or sichsecha inav, or avanav, or same idea, singeing stones. That fire liability doesn't just go ahead and cover actual loss, but it covers also damage. Rashi says over here, literally again, if my fire like licks at the plowed field of my friend, so we'll discuss this idea that when it comes to Eish, not only is there liability ultimately for actual destruction, but there could be liability for even some level of smaller damage. Good. Sefer Rabbi say, turns out that halacha l'maisa, unique to write all 4 categories because each one has some unique aspect which could not have been gleaned from the other. Incredible. Hasada Shabbos Shabbat. So Rabbi says, remember again, after the Mishnah goes through all the different categories and explains why they're different, the Mishnah says at Tzad Hashava. What does it mean at Tzad Hashava? The common denominator. So we'll say, what is the common denominator, ultimately, again, between all of the categories of damages? Here's what the Mishnah said. Shedarkan lahazik, ushmirasan alecha, ukishehizik chav hamazik lehshalem tashlumei nezek b'meitav haaretz. The common denominator, I will say, is these are all things, right? These are all things that damage, all things that you are responsible to watch over, and all things that when they do damage, I, the owner of the object, am responsible to pay for damages. That's the common denominator. So says the Gemara, I will say now, in general, whenever you see like a tzara shava is a common denominator, but a common denominator that creates a paradigm. So therefore, again, the paradigm that is created in the Mishnah is any object that damages, right, that I have responsibility to watch, and that is owned by me. If it damages, I'm chayiv. Now again, the last part of the Mishnah is I'm chayiv to pay from the best of my property if I'm paying with real estate, but we'll leave that on the side. So what is coming to be included over here? Right? What else is being included over here? Lasuye mai. So now that we have this paradigm, what else is it including? So it's actually a really interesting Gemara. Abaye says like this: Lasuye avno sakino umaso shenichem berosh gago v'noflo beruach mitzuye v'heziko. Interesting. What does it come to include? Coming to include the following case. Well, so imagine the following situation. I placed my stone, my knife, or my package, my load, on top of the roof, right on a rooftop, and then a ruach mitzuya. Ruach mitzuya means a regular wind came along, knocked it down, and it damaged. So based on the paradigm of the Mishnah, I would be chayiv for that. The Gemara says, 1 second. Hechidami, what's the case? Now, if the objects are, say, damaged as they were falling down, then that really falls into the category of eish. Because remember again, how does fire damage? By moving, right? So again, if they're damaged, in other words, if I place it on the roof, the regular wind blows it, it falls down, and as it's coming down, it lands on someone, right? The knife falls into someone, the stone hits someone, the package lands on someone's head, right? So, or animal for that matter, it doesn't have to be a person. So then that's eish. So Maishna eish. So why? What's unique about eish? The koach achar me'urav bo, umamoncha, ushmirasu alecha. So it's because remember again, what's eish? Eish is number one, that it only works because there's another force involved in it, right? And eish is usually wind, right? So there's another force involved in it. I own it, and I'm responsible to watch over it. So haninami, so we'll say that would be the same thing as this case of the stone, of the knife, and of the package. There's another force involved. In the case of the stone, the knife, and the package, what's the other force involved? The wind, right? The wind. Umamoncha, and these objects belong to me. Ushmiras alecha, and ultimately, again, I'm responsible to watch them. So it's not really a chiddush, because the Lamaisa, again, that's eish. So I guess, I agreed, there'd be liability, but that's because it falls under the umbrella of eish. The Gemara says, Ella must be basar denaichi. It must be able to say that I place these objects on the roof. A ruach mutzi, a regular wind came along. I will say, by the way, the reason we'll get to this, but why are we setting it up as a ruach mutzi, a regular wind, as opposed to a ruach she'ena mutzuya? Because it will say, if I place something on my roof, and the truth is, it's strongly embedded enough, or placed enough, or anchored down enough, that a regular wind wouldn't move it. But now, like a gale force wind comes along and blows it off, I'm not responsible for that. Right? Then I'm not responsible. So that's why, again, we're talking about over here, where halacha l'maisa, a regular wind moved it. Okay, so rather it must be Allah, basar denaichi. So it must be the case like this. I placed the object on my roof, a regular wind came and blew it down, it fell down to the ground. Now, once on the ground, it damaged. So the Gemara says, okay, let's analyze this. Idafkarinu. So if we're talking about a case where I made the object hefker, once it fell to the ground, then bein l'Rav, bein l'Shmuel, hainu bar. Then we'll say everyone agrees that a hefker object on the ground is bar. That's bar, right? So then again, so obviously it falls under the category of bar. So Mashna bar, so why? What's unique about bar? Here's, remember again, we'll say, we always go back to our definitions. What's bar? Shechein tchilas asiyah solenezek, A bar from its inception is ready to damage. Mamoncha, it belongs to me. Ushmi rasan alecha, and ultimately I have responsibility to safeguard it. So we'll say that's the definition. If that's the case, then when you have these objects that blow off the roof, fall onto the ground, it satisfies the same criteria. Haninami, tchilas asiyason lenezek, right? From the beginning, they're ready to damage. Mamoncha, they belong to me. Ushmi rasan alecha, and ultimately, again, I am responsible to watch over it. So we'll say, so it's bar. Rather, it has to be the lo afkarinu. Rather, it must be a case. I placed the objects on the roof, they blew off the roof, they're on the ground, and I didn't make it hefker. Interesting. I didn't make it hefker. So the Gemara says, Shmuel da amar kula mi baro lamanu haynu bar. So according to Shmuel, even though again it's not hefker, it's still going to be bar. To which the Gemara says, li olam dafkarinu. In reality, I made it hefker. Velo damu labar. And I will say, ultimately, again, it's not compared to bar. Why is it not like bar? So, ma lebar shekin ein koach achar mu'urav bo, tomar bahani shekoach achar mu'urav bahen. So I will say, here's the fundamental difference. Bar has no other force involved in it. Right? This is actually very important. So, bar, I will say, again, remember, you dig a bar, there's no other intervening force that allows that bar to be a damaging presence. Bar just damages, right? In other words, contrast it with Aish, right? Remember, you know, we'll say, how does Aish damage? How does Aish damage? Only when there's another force introduced. What's the other force? What's the wind? Because remember, again, without wind, the fire is stationary. The fire is stationary, it's not or it might be damaging that which is sitting on top, but Lamaisa, again, remember, the fire starts out in my domain. So therefore, the Gemara says as follows. So if at the end of the day, this isn't bar, right? So again, let's just be clear on the case. I place the objects on my rooftop. When Ruach Mitzvah comes along, blows it off. Now it's in the Rosh Hashanah, we're saying I didn't make it hefker, and now someone gets damaged by it. So what is that? It can't be bar, because unlike bar doesn't have an intervening force, right? This has an intervening force. Eish docheach. So I'll say, maybe it's Eish. Ma leish shekin darko leilech ulahazik. So we'll say, so ultimately again, Eish will prove this. So we'll say, because Eish does have an intervening force. Right? Eish does have an intervening force. To which the Gemara says, Eish dochiach. So let Eish carry the day, because Eish, we'll say, does begin by being a damaging force. The problem with Eish is that, again, Eish has an intervening force. So, bar tochiach, v'chazra din, and we go back and forth, and we say essentially, lo reizeh, the cases are dissimilar. What's the tzad hashava? What is the common denominator? The common denominator, I will say, becomes an item that has the capacity to damage. Ultimately, again, a responsibility to guard it is mine, and it's owned by me. So too it comes to include this case. So we'll say, so pause here for just a second. What are we trying to accomplish over here? Right. So remember again, just to clarify, the Mishnah gave me 4 categories of damages. Okay. The Mishnah then told me how each one is different from the other, and we just saw an additional way that each of them are different from one another. Then the Mishnah ended off with a mahatzad. A mahatzad means what is the common denominator. But I will say, but common denominators also create overarching rules. What's the common denominator? The common denominator between the 4 categories of damages is that all 4 are things which have the ability to damage, right? Have the ability to damage. I am responsible to prevent them from damaging. I own those items. So to any other case that falls into that rule, one will also be responsible for damages. So we'll say, what we're trying to do right now is to figure out, so what other cases fit into that rule? That's what we're trying to figure out. So now, Abaye came along and just gave us a new case, right? Abaye says, what's the case that fits into that rule? Here it is. I placed my stone, my knife, or my package on top of my roof. Now what happens? The wind blew it off. Ruach Mitsuya, regular wind, which means what? I was negligent. I didn't secure it enough. So a regular wind comes along, blows it off. Now it's on the ground. And halacha l'maisa, I wasn't mafkir it. I didn't make it hefker. So therefore it's not bar. It says on the ground. And someone trips over it. Right? Or someone gets cut by the knife. What's the halacha? I'm liable. Why am I liable? Because the case fits into the paradigm. Because why? It is an object that has the capacity to damage. I have a responsibility to watch over it, and it's owned by me. And it's owned by me. So boom, so here it is, right? So the Gemara just gave me an additional case that ultimately, again, fit into the paradigm as a spouse to the Mishnah. Good. I'm sorry? That's the whole point. It doesn't fall into a category. That's the whole idea. Once you create a principle, now again, it could fit into a category depending on a whole variety of different things. Maybe it's still bar according to Shmuel, because Shmuel holds a bar doesn't have to be hefker, but that's the whole point. The whole point is the Ma'at created a paradigm or created a rule, and if you satisfy this criteria, then there is liability. So Rava says, Rava Amar, so I'll say we're just trying to. So all we're trying to do, and it's going to be the majority of the staff, try to figure out additional cases which fall under the rubric of this rule or the umbrella. So Rava says, interesting. Lasuye bar hamiskalgel baragle adam ubaragle behema. So Rava said, this is actually very interesting. It's very interesting. Rava says it comes to include a case of a rolling bar. A rolling bar. So a pit, right, a rolling bar that is kicked around by the feet of people or by the feet of animals. So I will say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. What does it mean, a rolling bar? So look at Rashi. Boro ha-meskalgel. Rashi says, Kigon hiniach even b'rishus harabim. We'll say, here's the case. I placed a rock in the rishus harabim. And what happens? He says, Uba oda b'mkoma lo hizika. When I placed the rock down, the rock did not damage anything. V'gilgala ragle adam ubehema lemakom achar ve'zika sham. This Rabbi says is an interesting case. So I placed the rock down in Rosh Hashanah. Now we'll say, are you allowed to place a rock down in Rosh Hashanah? Are you allowed to? No. But I did. But when I did, it didn't do anything. Then what happened? So obviously, again, the stone got kicked around in Rosh Hashanah, either by animals or by people. And then I will say, what ended up happening? It landed somewhere else. And in that second location, it did damage. It's an interesting case, right? So now the shaila is, what's my liability? So watch this. So Rava Amar Lasuye Bar HaMisra, Rava says the rule of our Mishnah, the ma'at of our Mishnah, comes to include this case. Now what's the case? And the Gemara says, Heichidami, what's the case? Idaf karinu. So if I placed the stone down and I made it hefker, so bein l'rav bein l'shmuel hainu bar. They will say again, remember, a hefker object in Rishus Harabim is going to be bar. So I will say, if I placed it down and I made it hefker, that's bar. And once it's bar, even if it's kicked around, I'm still liable for that. Okay. So the Gemara says, because why? Maishna bar, shekein tchilas asiyos lo nezek, because a bar from its inception, right, is ready to damage. Ushmi rasa alecha, and I have responsibility to guard it. Haninami tchilas asiyosan lenezek ushmi rasa alecha. So to, I will say, if I place a stone down, I make it hefker, from the beginning it's ready to damage, and I have responsibility to prevent it from damaging. So I will say, if you're telling me that I'm placing a stone down, I made it hefker, then it got kicked around, that's bar. So rather, ella de lo afkarinu. Oh, so it must be what? It must be that halacha l'maisa, I placed the stone down, and I didn't make it hefker. Okay. So the Gemara says, L'shmuel damar kula miboro lamadnu haynu bar. So according to Shmuel, that says that halacha l'maisa, even if it's not hefker, it still becomes bar. So this will be bar. So the olam daf karinu. So in reality, I made it hefker. I placed the stone down. I made it hefker, and now it got kicked around, and in its new kicked around location, that's where it does damage. V'lo dami labar, but it's different than bar. Why is it different than bar? Says incredible. Ma labar shekei masav garmulo. They will say, when it comes to bar, whose actions cause the damage? Me, right? In other words, I dug the bar, or remember again, I placed the object, the stumbling block, in the Rosh Hashanah, and therefore again, my placement is what created the damage. They both say this case is different over here, right? Tomar Bahani, Shein Masav Garmulo. They both say, did I cause the damage in this case? Not really, right? I placed the stone down, but my action did not cause the damage. What caused the damage is that people or animals kicked the stone somewhere else, and the stone in its new location ended up causing damage. But I really didn't do it. So the Gemara says, so shar yochiach, but shar is different. I will say shar will prove the point, because what is shar? I will say ultimately, again, in the case of shar, the owner of the animals, they didn't cause any damage, yet they are still liable for the damage that the axe does. Look at Rashi, shar yochiach, shein maseh bailim garmu ha'ezek, ela mamono hezek, vainu atzara shava dinakab mas nisin. So shar is interesting because you must remember again, shar, I, the owner of the ox, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything, because remember again, the case of shar is not necessarily a case of negligence, where I was negligent with my axe. My axe just went off. Right? So l'maisa, again, shar is a perfect example, or even though I did not do anything to cause the damage, I am still liable. To which the Gemara says, shar mal shar shekin darko leilech ulahazik. But shar is different, says Gemara. Why? Because shar is common for a shar to do damage. Bar tochiach. So the pit will prove the point. To which the Gemara says, Chazra din lo zechus. So the point is, we go with this case over here, that this case doesn't really fit into any of the previous categories, right? So remember again, to be clear, what's Rava's case? Rava's case is, I placed the stone down in Rosh Hashanah, right? And what happens? It gets kicked around by people or by animals. In its new location, after it's been kicked around, then it does damage. So interestingly enough, this case doesn't really fit in to any of the previously established cases. It doesn't fit into the case of shar, right? It doesn't fit into the case of bar. So therefore we'll say, so what is it? To which the Gemara answers, there is liability. Why is there liability? Based on the mahatzad of the Mishnah. Based on the rule established. What's the rule established in the Mishnah? Anything that has the capacity to damage, that you are responsible to watch, right? And that is owned by you. Any of those things, right? If it satisfies those three criteria, there is liability. So we'll say, in this case, when I placed the stone down in Rosh Hashanah, and again it's kicked around and ultimately does damage, that case satisfies those three criteria, and ultimately, again, there's liability. So we'll say, so remember, this is all we're trying to do right now. We're just trying to find, whenever the Mishnah goes ahead and mentions a rule, in this case, the matzah, the common denominator, it's coming to include additional cases more than those mentioned in the Mishnah. So we're just coming up with the additional cases which can now generate liability as a result of the mahatzad of the Mishnah. Incredible. Let's go weiter. Ravad bar Ava Amar. So Ravad bar Ava is another case. He says, La'asuye hadesanya, to include the following situation. Listen to this. Kol elu sha'amru poskin. This is actually a fascinating case. Kol elu sha'amru poskin bivosehen. The garfin ma'arosein bi mosachama ein lam rishus. Okay, so let me tell you this case. Well, so here it is. So remember again, person has a home. There's no indoor plumbing. There's no indoor plumbing. So what did people do? It's actually interesting. We just did this last night in Am Yomi, right? Li'es mitzo. The Gemara discusses what's the most important thing to have at your disposal whenever you need it. A bathroom, a beis hakisei. So remember again, I will say a person had a bathroom. But what did the bathroom consist of? Right? A hole in the ground outhouse. I both say, so what do you have on the outhouse? You have like a pit, like essentially, it's like a sewer pit. It's like a sewer pit without a sewer, right? So in other words, so you have the waste that accumulates in a pit. Every once in a while, you have to clear that out. So I would say, so where are you clearing that out into? So interestingly enough, it seems to be the place where they cleared it out into was Rishus Harabim. Good idea to stay home that day, right? I had no travel. Rosh Hashanah. Now, said, here's what's interesting. So there are halachos concerning how you're allowed to go ahead and clear out your sewer pit. So we'll say, so the halacha is as follows. You are allowed to do it during the rainy season, not during the summer season. So which makes sense, right? Why? Because during the rainy season, hopefully everything gets just washed away. And anyway, during the rainy season, the roads are muddy anyway, right? In other words, people are expecting some level of dirt, of weight. So again, that was common. But during the summertime, you can't do it because during the summertime there's no rain, right? And ultimately, again, everything just ends up sitting there. So watch this. He says, Kol elu sha'amru, all of the cases that we mentioned, poskin bivosein, that literally again clean out your pits, the garfin marosein, and literally again shovel out the caves, not cleaning out the sewers. Bimosachama during the summertime you can't do it. But during the wintertime you can do it. So we'll say, so now take a look, first of all, take a look at Rashi just a moment. Rashi says over here, Kol elu sha'amru, v'kachashev azaluhu, elu poskim bivoseim, v'garfim ma'aroseim kilomar, Kol elu sha'amru chachamim, sheishan rishus lahashlich niskem sham. Now, boss, you have to understand how unique this is. By allowing people to clean out their sewers into Rosh Hashanah, we'll say, what are you effectively allowing? You're allowing people to place stumbling blocks, right? In other words, cleaning out waste into Rosh Hashanah is pretty wild. In other words, people could slip on that, right? Animals could slip on that, right? People could be, right? Somebody could put down their produce and it could be totally ruined. In other words, you are allowing for people to put a damaging force into Rosh Hashanah. You're allowing them to do it. What's the halacha? The Gemara says you're allowed to afal pi shebershus im hiziku chayavim l'shalei. Fascinating, no? Even though you are allowed to put your produce out there, right? You are allowed to do this, but understand if you did so and it damages, you're chayav. Fascinating, right? So in other words, I am allowed to clean out my sewer pit, but again, halacha l'maisa, if I did it and it damages, I am liable. And a very interesting halacha. So you are allowed to go ahead and empty out the sewer pit into Rosh Hashanah only during the rainy season, but you must do so with care and concern, because if somehow you damage your chayiv. So Gemara says, what's the case? Heichi So what are we talking about? So like, if at the end of the day, if you can imagine that like, I'm shoveling out my sewer pit, and I throw a shovel full of waste, right? And I'm not looking, and it hits someone and knocks them over, and they fall down. He'll say, so again, not pretty, but l'maisa, that's kocho. So then that's adam hamazik, right? That's adam hamazik. That's a case of a person who's directly damaging. Ella basar denayich. Rather, what must the case be? It must be that the case is where I emptied out the sewer pit, the waste is in Rosh Hashanah, right? And once it's there, it damages someone. So someone slips on it and falls. So what's the case? So if I made it hefker, so bin the rab bin the shmuel hainu bar. So we'll say if I made it hefker, then what? That's bar. So the Gemara says maishna bar, because why? Because what's bar? Bar the tchilas asiyas lenezek. Because remember again, a bar from its inception damages umamoncha, and it's owned by me. Ushmiras alech, and I have responsibility to guard it. Haninami, this also. Tchilas asiyasan lenezek umamoncha ushmirasan alecha. So we'll say this case as well. Again, that would be a case of, remember, shoveling out the waste into Rosh Hashanah has the capacity to damage from the outset. It's owned by me, and I have responsibility to guard it. So if we're just talking about a case, we'll say, so again, if it's about a case where I'm shoveling out the waste, and I throw a shovel full at someone, and it hits them and knocks them over, so that's kochol, that's adam hamasik, that's the person who damages. If I shoveled it out and it's sitting in a shtarabim, right, and I was mafkirt, I made it hefker, and now, halach l'maisa, someone slips on it and it falls, that's bar. Ella, dilo afkarinu, rather it must be a case where what? I shoveled it out into shtarabim, and I didn't make it hefker. Okay. The Shmuel Amar Kula Mibora Lamanu Hainu Bar. Suppose it's still according to Shmuel, that would still be a case of bar. To which the Gemara says, you're right. The Olam Da'afkarinu. In reality, I shoveled out the waste. It's sitting in a shtarabim, and I did make it hefker. It's hefker. So why isn't it bar? To which the Gemara says, why isn't it bar? To which the Gemara says, V'lo dami lebar, ma lebar shekin lo birshos. Wow. Tomar bahani shebirshos. I will tell you why it's not bar. Why isn't it bar? Because bar is something you do without permission. You don't have a right to dig a pit in the Rosh Hashanah. You don't have a right to leave a stumbling block in Rosh Hashanah. So the whole essence of bar is you're doing something without permission. But I will say, but what's different about this case? You have permission. You have license. Right, you have a license to shovel. Right, you have a license. Right, you have a license to go ahead and clean out the sewer pit. So it's not bar. So the Gemara says, "Amud Beis Shor Yochiach." So Shor will prove. We'll say because shekin darko leilech ulahazek. So we'll say Shor is a perfect case. Why? I have a right to have a Shor. Rashi says over here, Shor Yochiach. Top Rashi Bava Beis 6b. Shebir Shus Beis in Humahalech Rishus Arabim. Shari Kol Adam Yeshlo Rishus Bekach. So we'll say Shor is a perfect example. My Shor, I have permission to have a shar, right? I have permission for my shar to walk around. Yet there is still liability for my shar. Shekein darkol leilech ulahazik bar tochiach. No, but Pit will prove the other point. We'll say so. Chazra din lorei zechariah. So we'll say. So bottom line, the Gemara says you're right. The cases are this case doesn't neatly fit into any one of the categories. Right? That's what we're trying to highlight over here. We'll say. Remember again, we have one simple mission. What's our mission? We're trying to figure out what additional cases could fit into the mahatzad. Let's try to figure out. So I will say, so this is a great case over here. So I'll tell you a case. A case is where a guy, with permission, is cleaning out his sewer pit. The waste lands in Rosh Hashanah, right? Right? He makes it hefker, and someone goes ahead and slips on it and is injured, and there's liability. So what case is that? So I will say, it's not bar, right? Why isn't it bar? It's not bar because at the end of the day, I have permission to go ahead and, right? I have permission to go ahead and shovel it out. It's not shar. Why is it not shar? Because the derech of shar is to go and to be mazik. So what is it? And the answer is, you're right. It doesn't neatly fit into any one of the categories. So why are you liable? I'm liable because it conforms to the rule. What's the rule? The rule is object that has the ability to damage. I have the responsibility to watch over it, and it belongs to me. Right? So ultimately, again, because it fits into that category, therefore there is going to be liability. Incredible. I will say, by the way, a tremendous Musar Haskell from this case of poskin bivo saying the garfin maro saying, right, of cleaning out the sewer pit. I will say, what's the Musar Haskell? The Musar Haskell is, at some point in time, everyone has to clean out the schmutz that has accumulated inside. And I will say it happens to all of us. Right? We tend to go ahead and we usually do this once a year, right? The once a year is called Elul, right? Where I look inside the pit, right? I look inside the repository, right? And I go ahead and I clean out all of the schmutz that's accumulated over there. But the reality is, it's not a once a year thing. I will say the process of cheshbon hanefesh, the process of introspection, of looking inside and identifying what's broken, what's misfiring, what's not working well, what needs to be repaired, is a process that we have to engage in on a fairly regular basis. How often? That depends on the person. So for some people, do a cheshbon hanefesh every single day. Other people once a week, some people once a month, but probably shouldn't be any longer or any less frequent than once a month. And I will say, just to be clear, sometimes a person does a cheshbon hanefesh, and I find the schmutz that's accumulated, and to be honest, sometimes I'll say to myself, you know what? I'm not ready to clean out that schmutz. I'm not ready to do that. For whatever the reason, people sometimes become very connected to their schmutz, right? But maybe I'm not ready to clean out the pit just yet. I would say, so sometimes that's okay. Sometimes for whatever the reason, I'm not ready to tackle certain issues. But even if I'm not ready to tackle the issues, it's so important to be aware of the issues. Right? So often in life, we ignore stuff. And ignoring problems is the worst thing in the world. You can't necessarily solve everything right now. But I should always be at least aware and cognizant of the stuff that needs to be cleaned out. And even if I'm not ready to clean it right now, at least I know it needs to be cleaned, and at some point in time, I know I'll find the courage to confront. But the same way Chazal gave permission to clean out the sewer pits, right, at certain times during the year, so important for us to be cognizant, to do cheshbon hanefesh, to introspect, and be ready to clean out the stuff that accumulates as well. Incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says like this, we'll say, Ravina Amar. So we'll say Ravina gives another case. And these are all great cases. They're fascinating because, again, I will say, as Moshe really pointed out before, remember, the whole chap of these cases is they don't neatly fit into any of the aforementioned or created categories. That's the whole chap, right? So they go ahead and they don't really, but because of the Mahatzad kind of gives me an overarching framework to fit this stuff in. Ravina says, Lasui hadisnan. It includes that which you mentioned. Listen to this. Listen to this case. We'll say I have a wall or a tree, right? And my wall or my tree fell into the public domain and damaged. So what's the halacha? Pater milashalim. I'm exempt. Very interesting. So the Gemara says, however, let's say again, Bezin comes along. Right? And Bezin sees that tree not looking good, or the wall not looking good. And Bezin says, within 30 days, you need to take down that tree, right? Or take down or repair that wall. And then what happens? V'naflu. It falls down. Now, if it's beso chazman, vezigo pater. So we'll say, if the tree or the wall falls down within the time I had to repair it, then I'm pater, right? Because again, it's not my fault. I had time to repair it. It fell down early. I'm pater. La'achar azman chayiv. But if it falls down after the time, so the Bezin gave me 30 days. On day 32, the wall falls down, the tree falls down. I'm going to be chayiv. So the Gemara says, "Heichi dummy." What's the case? So we'll say, so now remember. So let's go back for just a second. So now what we're saying is as follows. So if you in general, so there's really two cases over here. Case number one is stam, my wall or my tree, which is totally fine, totally normal, falls down into Rosh Hashanah and damages, I'm potter. The variation on that case is, if Beis Din walked by and said, hey, that tree or that wall does not look good, and they gave me 30 days, I'm using 30 days just as an arbitrary number, they gave me 30 days to repair it. If it falls down within 30 days, I'm going to be potter. If it falls down after 30 days, I'm going to be chayiv. So Gemara says, what's the case here? Heichi dami, what's the case? Ida afkara, so we'll say, if I made the tree or the wall hefker, then bein l'rab, bein l'shmuel, hainu bar. Then we'll say again. So if we're talking about a case where I made the tree or the wall hefker, it fell down. Now it's sitting in Surabim, somebody trips over it and falls. So then what? That's bar. That's bar. So the Gemara says, Maishna bar, because why? What's unique about bar? Maishna bar, de ziko matzu yishu rasa alecha. Bar is unique, I will say why. Because bar, at the end of the day, again, has zeko matzu, it commonly damages, right? Or it's common for it to damage. I have responsibility to guard it. Right? So then ultimately again, if I made the tree and the wall hefker, then it's bar. Ida lo afkerinu, if I did not make it hefker, then l'shmuel da'amar klulam mi boro lamanu hainu bar. According to Shmuel, it'll still be bar. According to Rav, maybe not. Fine. So Gemara says, you're right. The olam da'afkerinu. In reality, I made it hefker. So the tree and the wall fell down, or even before the tree and the wall fell down, I made it hefker, and ultimately, again, now it's a bar. So the Gemara says, "Velo dami labar," but it's still not like a case of bar. Why not? Listen to this. Ma labar shekain tchilas asiyas lenezek. We'll say, remember again, a bar from its inception is what? Is a damaging force. That's the whole chab, right? In other words, the bar in its essence, we'll say, a bar in its essence is a damaging force, right? A bar, it's sitting there. So either I actually dig a bar, or I leave an object in Rosh Hashanah from the beginning, that item is a damaging force. Tomar bahani shein tchilas asiyas lenezek. The Rabbi says it's different in this case. Why? Because in this case, the Rabbi said it's a wall and it's a tree. From its inception, it's not a damaging force. It's not a damaging force. To which the Gemara says, Shar yochiach. Okay, so we'll look at Shar. We'll say, what's unique about Shar? Shar from its inception is also not a damaging force, right? A Shar is a Shar. Shar is an ox. Not a damaging force, yet you're still responsible. So you can see from here that when the tree or the wall falls down, ultimately you'll be responsible as well. Here's the difference. Mal Shar shekin darko leilech ulahazik. While it's true that a Shar from its inception is not a damaging force, but nevertheless what? It is common, right? The derech of a Shar is to do damage. That's different than a tree and a wall, where again, its derech is not to do damage. Portochiach, the chazra, adin, also we keep going back and forth. Remember again, lo ra'izeh k'ra'izeh, for lo ra'izeh k'ra'izeh. So this case of Ravina, of the wall or the tree that fell down, and now is in the Shirabim and does damages someone, is not like bar, right? Why is it not like bar? It's not like bar because halacha l'maisa, bar from its inception is a damaging force. This is not a damaging force. It's also not like shar. Why is it not like shar? It's the derech of shar to damage. It's not the derech of a tree or of a wall to damage. So we'll say, so what category does it fall into? And what's the answer? None of the above. But what does it fall into? The mahatzad. So I will say, so remember again, what is the mahatzad? What is the common denominator? What does the paradigm teach us? Any case where what? Where ultimately, again, an item has an ability to damage, it's owned by me, and I have, or really number two is, item has ability to damage, I have responsibility to guard it, and it's owned by me, I'm going to be chayiv. Therefore, we'll say in this case of Ravina. So we'll say, so now what we've successfully done is Abaye, Rav Ada Bar Ava, and Ravina have given three different cases, interesting damage cases that don't really neatly fit into any one of the aforementioned or previously established four categories of damages. And that's why the Mahatzal of the Mishnah comes to teach you liability in all of these cases. Really interesting. Good. Let's go back there. Kishechizik chav hamazik. So we'll say, so remember again. So now we're quoting from the Mishnah. After the Mishnah quoted the Mahatzad, after the Mishnah quoted the common denominator, ultimately again the paradigm. So the Mishnah said ukishehizik chav hamazik. So any case that falls into the paradigm, kishehizik, when damage was done, chav hamazik. The damager is liable. Someone just asks a syntax question. The Gemara says chav hamazik. Chayiv hamazik mibayle. Why does the Mishnah say chav hamazik? It should say chayiv. It's just a textual question, right? Why doesn't it say chayiv? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, Hay Tana Yerushalmihu. The Tana is a Yerushalmi. The Tani Lishna Kalila. Ultimately, the Yerushalmiim, right, were known for using truncated lashon. They spoke shorthand. I don't know if you could speak shorthand, right? But they spoke in a more abbreviated, a more truncated fashion. Also, it's interesting. The Gemara says it's almost like the way the Gemara says it is, he's Yerushalmi. I was saying, like there's no greater compliment in the world than being called the Yerushalmi, right? A Jew who's able to say, who am I? I'm a Yerushalmi. I've always been jealous of that. So imagine being able to say, I am a Yerushalmi, right? My identity is intertwined with Yerushalayim Irak Kodesh. Incredible. In any event, the Yerushalmi will say, by the way, so just to point out over here, we see this all the time. One of the reasons I will say why Talmud Yerushalmi is so much harder than Talmud Bavli. In other words, we think Bavli is hard because it's a different language, right? It's Aramaic. But Bavli at least is written out in full sentences, right? Yerushalmi is not full sentences. Yerushalmi is not full sentences, which is what makes it that much more complicated. So this is an expression over here. So here's a perfect example. Bavli, you would write chayiv. How do you write chayiv? Because why not write chayiv? Yerushalmi, they wrote in a more abbreviated form, so they would just say chav. Chav. Okay, beautiful. So Gemara says as follows. We'll say, I'll point out to you, just as an aside, why here? So why out of all places, why in Arba Avos Nezikin, ultimately again, is the Tana a Yerushalmi, who says Chav HaMazik? Why here? They will say, what's the whole chap of our Mishnah? The whole chap of our Mishnah is, if you damage something, what's your obligation? Make it whole. They will say, so what's the embedded message in the Mishnah? Who's speaking over here? A Yerushalmi. And what is Yerushalmi saying? The ultimate thing that's been damaged for Klal Yisrael is the Beis HaMikdash, is that which resides in Yerushalayim Yirak Kodesh. But what does the Mishnah say? Any damages must always be made whole. And the Tana from Yerushalayim Yirak Kodesh, what is he telling us in a little bit of a subliminal message? Don't worry. Don't despair. Because even that which was damaged, even that which was destroyed, our beautiful Beis HaMikdash, one day in Yahrzeit Hashem will be made whole as well. So we'll say, let's go weiter. Incredible Gemara. So let's go weiter. It says the Gemara, L'shalim tashlumi nezek, ultimately again to go ahead and pay tashlumi nezek. So this is just a quotation from the end of the Mishnah. So we'll say, so now remember, the end of the Mishnah actually said, L'shalim tashlumi nezek v'meitav ha'aretz, that you have to pay damages, and when you pay damages, if you're paying from real estate, you have to pay from the best lands. Let's go back. It says, Gemara, Tana Rabbanon, Meitav Sadeo, Meitav Kamma Yishali. So we'll say, so the pasuk says, you have to pay from the best of your field and the best of your vineyard. Now we'll say, this is an incredible machlokes, which at least we're really running behind. I don't know what happened. All right, such a short Amnah. Okay, in any event, so the Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara says, so Meitav Sadeo, Meitav Kamma Yishali. Meitav Sadeo Shal Nizak, Umeitav Kamma Shal Nizak Dev Rabbi Shal. Oh, what's this? And now we are coming to one of the most dramatic machloksim that we're going to have by damages. Now we'll say, when we say that you have to pay the best of your field, who's best? Right? Who based on who are we evaluating best? So Rabbi Shmuel says it's based on the property of the damaged party. We'll say, take a quick look at Rashi. Rashi's towards the top of the daf, in the shorter lines, 6 lines in. Meitav Sadeu Shal Nizak, Shem Achla Aruga Besadeu, Shaman Aruga Mishubachas Shal Nizak, Kamma Yafa Achshel Perosea, the Kamma Te Yafe below Peros Venosea. So we'll say, here's the Havamina. The Havamina is like this. Imagine my animal goes into Ruvain's field and eats a row of produce. So what do we do? How do we assess damages? So we'll say, it sounds like what we're saying right now is Rabbi Shmuel saying like this. We look at the best row of produce in Ruvain's field. And we assess like this. How much is that row worth with produce? And how much is that row worth without produce? And that's the amount of damages. So we'll say, it's interesting. Which is strange about it is it sounds like it's not based on what? It's not based on what my animal ate. But rather it's based on what the loss would be if Reuven suffered the loss of his best row of produce, which sounds a little bit strange, which we'll see. Now, Rabbi Akiva says, no. Lo ba'akasa el legabos le'nizakim mina idis. Rabbi Akiva says, no, that's not what it's coming to do. Rabbi Akiva says, the pasuk is the one coming to teach us that Allah l'maisa, you collect from damages from the best property. Kavachomer lehektish. Ultimately, again, kavachomer, ultimately from hektish. We'll see exactly what that means. But Allah l'maisa, Rabbi Akiva is saying, when we say that you collect from idis best property of who? Best property of who? Damager. So specifically, if you're paying in real estate, ultimately you have to pay from the best produce, from the best real estate. Say, we'll stop over here for today. Again, coming attractions, ridiculously good. This is one of the most yesodistic machloksim we're going to find. Ultimately, again, bid the nizak shaiminon, bid the mazik shaiminon. When we pay damages based on whose property is damaged, assess damages property, damaged party's property. In Eretz Hashem tomorrow, shkoyach. Have a great day. All right, have a great day, everyone. We're on Zoom. Kovac's family, beautiful. Baruch Hashem. No, it's not. It's choicest. Choicest is even better than choicest. Because it's choicest. It's choicest. Choicest is higher. Choicest is the best.